Hi, I'm Eleni Haynes. I'm your host for Dark Magazine's podcast. Today I'm putting Will Kostakis in the limelight, but just before we get to Will, I'd like to wave a few books at the screen that have just come in. There's Monstrous Child by Francesca Simon. It's a novel about Hel, the Asgard goddess of the underlife. This is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. It's a tool stopper. Nightfall by Jake Halpin and Peter Kujawinski. Sorry, apologies, Peter. After 14 years of day comes 14 years of night. Don't you get left behind. Mark Lawrence, The Wheel of Oshine, and I'm probably slaughtering the pronunciation of that as well, and that's another dual stopper. The next Star Wars novel, Bloodlines by Claudia Gray. I think this is supposed to be a really good one. And How to Be a Writer by John Birmingham. Aussie, 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 oi, oi, oi. Okay, today, as I said, I'm talking to Will Kostakis. In 2005, when he was still in high school, Will won the Sydney Morning Herald Young Writer of the Year Award for a collection of short stories. His debut, Loathing Lola, was released a few years later. His second novel, The First Third, is about a Greek boy living in Australia. It won the Gold Inky Award and was shortlisted for the Children's Book Council of Australia Award. His latest novel, Sidekicks, has a diverse cast, including a scholarship boy at a private school and a gay guy. But it was Will coming out himself that caused controversy. Welcome, Will Kostakis.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you've been writing and getting published since you were in high school. How did you know that you wanted to become a writer?
I haven't really imagined a life where I'm not a writer. I keep joking about it. I have this award that I got at the end of year one for excellence in creative writing, which I don't understand at all, because in year one, what would the sentence have been? You know, the dog is there, the dog is good, the end. I don't know what it was. I just seem to have had parents that supported me, one parent that supported me, and teachers that really, really encouraged me, and friends as well. And so I really didn't imagine a life for myself that didn't involve creative writing in some way.
Awesome. Now, how did you, as a high school student, get published?
It was a comedy of errors, basically. I was sending my books out from year 7 onwards. They kept saying no, but the no's became nicer and nicer as I grew older. And then come year 12, I'd been rejected by enough publishers that I thought, you know what, I'm going to pitch them a story. So I emailed them all a story pitch. But as I was pitching it, I changed the idea of the story, and I figured, oh, they'll take 6 months to get back to me. They ended up getting back to me that afternoon saying they'd like to read it. So after about 3 meetings of pretending I'd written a book that I hadn't, they ended up offering me a book deal. So, yeah.
Awesome. Oh, congratulations. How did you manage to be so resilient? Like, to keep trying in the face of rejections, especially at such a young age?
Well, I've read through, clearly delusion was a big part of that, but look, I just really enjoyed it, and I had enough people in my corner, and I knew that I was getting better. So every time they said no, I didn't take that to mean, okay, this will never happen. I just knew I had to work just that little bit harder. And I just kept sort of working towards it.
That is fantastic. Now, published writers in Australia are usually straight white men, but you only tick one of those boxes. Have you experienced any unusual hurdles to getting published?
Not so much for getting published or the content of my work, it's more in its reception. So I had written a gay character in The First Third, but you know, when I'm giving talks at certain schools, I'd be cautioned, hey, don't mention the gay character, which I find is really fun. Come up to me and say, hey, don't mention the Greek character, because, you know, those Greeks. And so it was just really weird that gay content was treated as completely different. And that was, to me, strange, but it was also another reason why I stayed in the closet for as long as I did. And then I ended up coming out myself, and that caused a few hurdles. So I had a school in Sydney they offered to host a book launch for me, but they rescinded that offer after finding out I was gay on my blog. But said that the book itself would no longer be appropriate, which was kind of strange because the blog post about me coming out had nothing to do with my book. But they equated, hey, Will is recently out. This is his latest book. It must be the gayest thing ever. So it was really weird, but at the same time, I've been really, really heartwarmed by just the reception of the book, the way that people have embraced not only me, but the gay characters that I've written. And, you know, for every school that comes up to me and says, hey, we love your book, but we don't let the kids read it, but the staff really like it. For every school like that, there are hundreds and hundreds who have embraced it and are using it to say, to show kids, because the wonderful thing about reading is that not only can you show kids who are gay, you know, that their experiences matter and that they have value, but you can also then show people who aren't gay, you know, this is what gayness is. It's not that scary. And, you know, they develop empathy and they understand the gay people in their lives or the gay people that they encounter just that little bit better.
Yeah. Growing up as a gay Greek, did you see many or any characters in books and on screen with whom you identified? Because you've got those two different facets of being different.
In terms of seeing myself reflected, not really. It wasn't until I remember it, I was in year 9 and I had my teacher presented, we read Shakespeare's sonnet, A Woman's Face. And that was a really pivotal moment for me. So if those who aren't familiar with the sonnet, it is Shakespeare writing either about his own experience or for a commission about a male who is attracted to another man's face. And that for me was really, really remarkable because I wanted to be a writer and I thought being gay was going to be a barrier to that. And then I realized, wait, William Shakespeare is in every single classroom in the land. Everybody knows his name and quotes his work, even if they haven't seen it. And he either entertained these thoughts or he wrote them for someone else and he was okay with it. So if Shakespeare can do it, then, you know, I can be Shakespeare. Obviously, that Greek arrogance coming through. But it was like, that was the really pivotal moment for me that I knew, okay, this is going to be fun.
That's great. Why do you think representation is important?
Well, it is that. It's seeing, you know, it's seeing yourself reflected. It, you know, on some level you see that your experiences have value, but on another level, I remember at that school that told me don't talk about the gay character in the first third, I asked the kids who their favorite character was, and this girl puts up her hand and she says, oh, Styx, who was the gay character. And I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, what was your favorite scene? And she's like, oh, the scene where he has sex. And I'm like, oh, God. And I remember
Don't talk about the gay character.
And so, you know, the teachers are there just like sinking into their seat. This is really fascinating. So they were year 10 girls, and I assumed, you know, all of them were heterosexual, or at least most of them. And I thought, what was it about that scene that connected with them the most? And, you know, the girl just said, oh, you know, it made me understand my friend Sam a little bit better. And that is what representation does. Representation begets understanding.
Yeah. And they do say that the people who read develop a greater sense of empathy than people who don't read.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of actually seeing yourself represented, or, well, I suppose to turn it on its head, if you've seen poor representation, what kind of impact has that had?
I don't, in terms of if I see something that doesn't ring true to me, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. It's like that Windex joke in My Big Fat Greek Wedding that I just don't understand. I know some Greek people really connect with it, but I'm just like, that just seems odd. And it's sort of, you get that, you feel a bit weird about it, but it's representation for someone. I find that if it's written by someone who has done their research or who knows a subject matter through personal experience, then who am I to say, oh, this representation is wrong? The thing about representation is that we should see a wide spectrum of this kind of character. Like, not every gay character needs to be sympathetic. Not every Greek grandmother needs to be doting and wise, you know. So I think part of being represented is that you're going to get represented poorly. But one of the wonderful things about pushing for diverse books is that, you know, the gay characters don't always have to be the villains, or and the gay characters too sometimes. And I guess it's just evening it out. So there'll always be bad representations of everyone. It's just a matter of making sure there's a lot more good ones as well.
And with that, as a writer, I mean, recently I was talking to Kylie Chan, and she was saying that she's spent some time working as a night porter in a university. She's about to write a book based in a university, and she said she's going to have to really rein it back from reality, because if she wrote like some of the stereotypes she's seen in the workplace, she would be accused of lazy writing. So what about as a writer?
Stereotypes are a stereotype for a reason. Like, there are, like, I had to, well, with the first third, I had to tone my grandmother down, and, you know, we really had to add a lot of shading there, because she has a bluntness to her that is very, very, very stereotypical. It was, some of that stuff just doesn't translate to the page. So it's like real world speech. You can say that your speech is realistic, but if you tried to write down the way that we all spoke, it wouldn't be engaging at all. So there is that element of, once we veer into fiction, there are things we have to do. Funnily enough, we have to fictionalize it more to make it more realistic.
Yes. I remember hearing some stories about your grandmother during the book launch and promotional tour for the first third. Would you like to share some of those?
Oh, well, how much time do we have? Well, no, one of the really, really great ones is, so since the release of the book, I invited her along to Sydney Writers Festival. And so she came along, and she was sitting in the front row. No one knew she was there, and I was doing my grandmother anecdotes. They were all there, about 800 kids in the hall. And then at the end, this girl puts up her hand and goes, "Oh, can you tell us another story about your grandmother?" And I'm like, "Oh, I probably shouldn't, but I've actually brought someone along with me." And you just basically had 800 kids in the room just start cheering for her, and all of them who'd read the book were really, really excited. And so I got her to stand up, and she's there doing the Queen wave, and she's trying to, you know, fight to get onto the stage. And I'm like, "No, yeah, this is my time. Sit down." But the really beautiful thing was, she sat next to me at the signing table just to keep me company, and kids kept approaching her to get her signature. And it's not the funniest of my grandmother anecdotes, but it's the one that means the most to me, because she came to Australia with a suitcase and a sick husband, and she wanted nothing more than her kids to have a better life than her. And so her kids went to high school, and that was it. And so her kids for a better life for themselves and their children. And so, you know, my generation is the first generation that's been to university, and now I have a book with my name on it, and my grandmother has signed a book that she thinks is about her life story. We're not telling her what it's actually about, but it's just really nice that I get to share someone like that with Australia while I still have her. So it's really nice.
That's wonderful. Yeah, can I ask, did she arrive as a boat person?
She arrived as a legal boat person. Well, they're all legal, but she arrived in the migration after the Second World War.
Just side comment there.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about Sidekicks. What can you tell us about the story without giving away huge spoilers? And do you have a copy to wave around there? Because I'm afraid I read mine before I moved, and now it's in storage. I've moved from a big house to a small flat, and most of my books are in storage.
I'm actually in a hotel at the moment, so I don't have it with me, which is terrible. I know I'm the worst author, and my publicist is going to get very angry with me. But basically, the Sidekicks is about a group of 4 guys, but they're not 4 best friends. They're 3 guys with the same best friend. And then that best friend passes away. And it's all about what those 3 other boys do to fill the void and eventually trace a path back to each other.
Yeah, and you have the scholarship boy and you have the gay guy, and so you're exploring a few different things in people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to take, so it's the sportsman, the rebel, and the nerd. And I wanted to take those three very, very sort of ways of looking at teenage boys and sort of look at everything that's underneath that and exploring who they are as people and seeing how they clash. And yeah, it was really, I always used to laugh at authors who would be like, oh, I finished writing this book and it's like, I miss my babies because they love their characters so much and their characters feel real. And I remember hearing that thinking, you sound like a crazy person. But this is the first time I've written a book and I feel genuinely sad that I don't get to occupy their world anymore. So yeah, it's really nice to get to share that now.
Well, I've seen some people on social media saying they want more, so they're hoping that you will take these people's stories and take them further.
Yeah, so I have an inkling for where their lives go, but I'm not quite sure. I think I have a clearer idea of where Bill's life goes. So if I did ever write a sequel, I think I'd probably look at that universe first because I think that was left more open-ended than, say, the Sidekicks was, which I think told its self-contained story in a really wonderful way.
I did like the decades later recap at the very end. I thought
that was imagined, so it's not. I think if I ended up writing more, it would veer from that a lot.
Well, that could be really good. We've talked already about the controversy with the schools and, don't talk about the gay character.
Yeah.
What impact do you think that your representation of your characters has had? Have you received feedback from students?
I remember I had a student, I was speaking at an international school in Singapore, and I was about to read about Styx, who was the gay character in the Sidekicks, but he also has cerebral palsy. And I remember getting up to speak, and I noticed that there was a disabled boy in the audience. And I was like, oh, I'd never visibly seen a disabled person before and identified them in the audience before I'd read about Styx. And I was hesitant to read it, but I'm like, no, I'm just going to read this like I normally would. And he approached me afterwards and he said, thanks very much for writing that. I don't get to hear about people like me very often. And it was just very understated, very slight. And I'm sure he hasn't really thought about me since, but that's something I've carried with me all these years since. And it's because there is a certain responsibility I know that first and foremost, we're storytellers, but we also have to be careful of representation because we're writing about people who are figuring out their place in the world, and our target readership, even though there's data that says adults read, young adult, whatever, our target readership are people who are looking for their place in the world. So we have a great responsibility when we represent and when we write.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
So do you intend to write more stories about diverse characters?
I just tend to write stories about real characters, and diversity is a part of that. If I wrote an all-male cast and all heterosexual cast, then that wouldn't be realistic, and I don't think it would be all that engaging. I think it's the diversity that makes stories interesting. It's the clash of perspectives, and yeah, I can't imagine writing a story that has cast members.
Well, who are your favourite queer characters in any fiction medium?
Oh, you put me on the spot now. And I'm really bad with names, so this is going to go horribly. I was a big fan of the TV series Looking, but that is no longer on the air. But in terms of young queer characters, most of them really annoy me, which isn't good.
No, it can be any age. It's more about who's a good, engaging character.
So I thought the characters on the TV show Looking, which was they called it gay Sex and the City, which I don't think it really was. But the way that it sort of looked, especially its second season, looking at, gay life in contemporary times was really, really remarkable. And it got cancelled, but that's what tends to happen. And actually, no, one of the really, really great queer characters who was, it was at least in the early series, Kalinda Sharma from The Good Wife. So she was presented as bisexual, and but she shied away from labels, and it was a really remarkable portrayal of someone who shied away from all the boxes society tends to put you in, and it was a really, the show just presented it as, this is who she is, whatever, and you'd have other characters who are like, is she gay? Is she bi? What is she? I don't really care. And it was just the way the show treated it in its early years was really, really remarkable and pretty groundbreaking.
That sounds great. What stories inspire you? Like, what have you read that you enjoy? What have you seen?
So for me, in major inspiration, you have Terry Pratchett. I think that guy can work wonders with a sentence like, I hope to one day be half the writer he is, and
have half as many books and sell half as many books.
I'll be happy with 10% as many books, 5%. He was a remarkably kind man, and fortunate enough to get to meet him on his last Sydney tour. So that was really, really lovely. But yeah, his writing is just incredible, and I'd love to one day try my hand at fantasy, but I'd always feel like I was in his shadow.
Oh, that's okay. Everybody's in his shadow.
In terms of Australian young adults, you've got, they're my peers, but I also look up to them. You've got Gabrielle Tozer, Ellie Marnie, Barry Johnsberg, Fiona Wood, Simone Howe, especially. They're all writing really, really remarkable that just really, really incredible.
Yes, I had Simone as a teacher last year.
Oh, so wonderful.
She taught me young adult writing. So that was great. And every single book that she recommended, I would rate as either 4 or 5 stars. So that was an eye-opener, because she'd bring all these Australian YA novels into class and let people borrow them, and I'd be like, okay, right, I'll just take this one and I'll bring it back next week and take some more.
She has remarkable taste, and you can see that in her writing. She really takes care with her work.
Yes. So what story, are you writing your next story? Are you percolating your next story now?
I have plotted out the next story. It's a bit of a departure for me, but I'm not going to say what it is yet, because I've spoken about a book before, getting a book deal before, and that ended horribly. So I'm going to wait it out, just have a go at writing it, and hopefully it'll be out soon. But at the moment, I'm touring the Sidekicks, visiting schools, meeting kids, doing signings and events. So there isn't really much time to write. So hopefully in the coming months, everything slows down a bit. Like, as much as I don't want it to slow down, it has to. Yeah, and I look forward to writing it before the end of the year, and then hopefully people will get to read it soon.
And apart from writing and touring, what else is in your future? Any big trips? Pardon?
Hopefully a lot fewer hospitality shifts, so please buy my book. I'm hoping to, I've just signed to a UK agent, so I'm hoping to pop over and visit her, which should be a nice tax-deductible trip. But yeah.
It's been great talking to you, so thank you very much.
That's great. Well, thanks very much for having me.
Well, thank you for fitting me in. I mean, sounds like you're absolutely flat out, so good luck with it all. I hope it's a blast. Yeah. And I do expect Sidekicks. I want to say it will definitely win awards. It's at least going to make some shortlists. I think it'll win some awards. So good luck to you.
Thank you very much.